this edition of Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Linda Duckworth, your host for today's program. Today we're talking to our friend from the League of Women Voters of Nebraska about what has happened in the 2025 Unicameral session so far and what is to come. By the way, we are taping on Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse political parties or candidates. However, the League does take positions on issues. Our purpose is to empower voters and defend democracy. Joining us today is Vice President of Action, Rachel Gibson. Thank you for being here, Rachel.
I'm always happy to talk about the legislature.
Lovely. That works great. Would you start by telling us how the legislature works in Nebraska and the role of Nebraskans in policymaking?
Yeah, so there are lots of unique things about Nebraska, but one of my favorites is our legislature, and that's for a couple different reasons. We have a citizen part-time legislature, so they only legislate in the spring. And we also have something unique in that it's a unicameral. Mm-hmm. So unlike, you think Congress, there's two houses, two bodies. We just have one.
We have bicameral 2 or unicameral 1.
Correct. Yes, you got it. So we have the unicameral, which is great in our state because it really allows us to be more involved. When we adopted this model in the 1930s, people asked, well, who's going to be the check? Who's the check on power? And they would say, well, the people are the second house. Mm-hmm. So we are actually written into being involved in our process, and that has some effects in actually how bills are passed.
Yep, I love that. And so how does the League interact with the legislature?
The League's got kind of two goals when it comes to advocacy. One is to empower people to know how to advocate for themselves. Mm-hmm. So some of what we do is educational. How do you find out who your senator is? How do you contact them? How do you read a bill? Things like that. The other is much more direct. So we actually have 6 different action teams that are different topics. And those are volunteers who are passionate about that area, who go through and read all the bills that are related. And then from those, they kind of highlight, these are the ones we think we should be looking at. And then we usually write a letter and go testify or submit it online to say, this is, the League's stance on this particular issue. And so that's how the action teams work. They're really, really cool.
They are, and they are, I have such great admiration for those members,
yes.
Those volunteer members. Wow, it's really something. And you, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
So we have seen bills this session that have been making their way through the legislature that are actually contradictory to ballot measures that were passed by the voters in Nebraska last year. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us more about those bills and where the League is with them and where those are right now?
It's an unfortunate pattern that we've seen this session, which is disappointing, and hopefully they'll hear from the people and decide to leave things alone. But there are actually 4 different issues that are very contradictory to what the public has been saying, whether it's through a vote or just in advocating. Yeah. The first is paid sick leave. So we, as the voters, passed that via initiative.
5% almost.
Almost it's like 0.3 under that. Yes.
Yeah.
So
right.
75%, that's huge.
Yes.
Nothing gets that high.
Right.
So Nebraskans overwhelmingly wanted that, passed it in November of 2024. And right now there's a bill, LB 415, which initially was just supposed to kind of clean up the language, but they've added a bunch of amendments that actually changes who's eligible, which employers need to offer it. It's basically starting to kind of peck away at who actually gets leave.
So seriously watered down.
Yeah. The second one is the minimum wage. So that was not this past election, but the one before. So in November 2022, Nebraskans passed minimum wage being raised. And this year we have LB 258, which is similarly cutting out certain groups that say, well, you can do 75%. So teenagers of a certain age, exempting certain employers that are a certain size, things like that. So again, just kind of picking at the edges. The one that really stands out to me, and this one hasn't moved anywhere yet, both of those have started debate.
Yes.
LB 509 is the Opportunity Scholarship, which the League is familiar with. We've worked on this issue the past two referendums.
Yes.
So this bill was actually passed last year, and the people voted to repeal it.
Yes.
So it was really disheartening when we saw that bill introduced because it's almost the exact same bill.
Almost identical.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And then the last one is winner take all. So there are two different pieces of legislation, LB3 and an LR. I can't remember the number right now. But those are wanting to change how we allocate our presidential votes because we do it a little differently than others. The hearing that was had on this had maybe an hour of proponents and then 5 hours of opponents.
Wow, you're right.
And yet that's been voted out of committee.
And the opponents didn't all say the same thing either. It was
a wide variety.
Yeah.
I was really surprised where people came from, even across the state, to just say, play fair. So that's another one we've seen where the people spoke pretty clearly, and yet that one is now moving forward as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just talking to a young friend today who was saying all this, taking what the voters asked for very clearly and then, watering it down so it's almost nothing. I think the word she described, her opinion of that was shady and weird.
I mean, I agree. And it's difficult because there are cases where we pass, as the people, we pass initiatives that directs the legislature to do something, but that wasn't the case in these two. These were very different types of things. So it is proving to be a bit of a challenge, and so we're going back to our mission.
I think they were petitions that were written to be just implemented, just as they were written.
Correct.
Yeah, with no bill needed.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what you've got some bills, other bills that have caught the attention of the league, I'm thinking. You want to tell us about those?
Yeah, quite a few. So to give some context, there's roughly 800 pieces of legislation that got introduced in the first 10 days of our legislature. So we divvied those up in our groups, and our members who work in those action groups, most of them are in the field that they're working in, or they really have a passion about it, so they know kind of what's important and what we need to focus on. So with that said, we've got a few that we're keeping an eye on. One is the Stand With Women Act that Senator Kauth has brought, and that is essentially similar to bathroom bills we've seen in other states. This one's kind of interesting, though, because in addition to restricting access to facilities just by your biological sex, it also has some interesting language at the beginning that says it's acceptable to have different spaces for men and women in certain situations. And that language is concerning to us because that's putting that in statute, and potentially what other areas are going to be deemed acceptable to have different spaces for men and women. So that's one that we're definitely keeping an eye on. There are a couple SNAP bills, so the supplemental nutrition, some folks call it food stamps.
Stamps, yeah.
We've got a couple bills that are supporting that. One from Senator Quick. Right now, we have a sunset on those benefits.
Okay.
And if that goes away, instantly, lots of people lose access to food. So he's trying to pull off that sunset date. We have another from Senator Roundtree that is currently individuals with certain felonies can never access SNAP even after they've served their time. So that's removing that requirement. And then an interesting one from Senator McKinney, and I've never thought about this. This is why I love our legislature, because you bring all these different perspectives. But the bill he brought would allow SNAP to be used in ready-made type situations, because there's a lot of rules about you can't go buy fast food or whatever it might be. But if you're disabled or elderly or even unhoused, you don't have anywhere to prepare food.
Where's that stove? Even a microwave, right?
Exactly. So it's expanding that to be for that specific subset. On the flip side, we're also seeing some that are trying to remove access to SNAP in a lot of different ways. There's one from Senator Anderson who wants to add work requirements in, even though it's very complicated, but we do have work requirements of some kind. He just really wants to pull
even
off
more.
of that.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's just a few.
Okay. So that would be our social policy committee that would be working on those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a helpful way to think about it. So in our different action groups, so we have social policy, which we just mentioned. Our government policy group was looking at some voter suppression bills that didn't move forward, which is good. Natural resources, there's some water bills about access and clean water. Education is, we've had some interesting bills introduced about kind of cultural issues. So, for example, there was one bill that would allow a chaplain in every school, or they're required to have the 10 Commandments in every classroom. So there are a couple like that we're keeping an eye on. Oh no, now I've started, I can't leave any of them out. Okay, let's see.
Oh, you mean the committees?
Yeah,
yes, that's
the
right.
different action teams.
Let's see. Health. There's health.
Oh, health. Yes, health. So health is interesting because there's a lot about rural access, and with our budget situation, that's really important. Health, social policy, natural resources,
Mental health.
yes,
It's actually,
disability and behavioral.
yeah, that's right. Not mental health.
And in that area, it's a lot of making sure we keep money in the programs that we already have.
Right.
Because the other big thing looming over this session is our state budget.
Yes. What's our deficit at right now?
Right now,
any
our
idea?
deficit, last I checked, so
Okay.
asterisk, note the date
This
that Linda.
is what again? April 3rd? Yes. Okay.
Right now, it's at 289 million in deficit. It started at 400 million, so we're making progress. But what that's pushing is that they're not really entertaining new programs that could help people.
Right.
They're actually going to need to take money from programs, potentially eliminate programs. That's one way to fill that deficit. The other way to fill that deficit is to look at the revenue we bring in. And if
There's a thought.
That's how it works at home. I need to work a few more hours,
Yeah,
That's kind of the vibe.
Right.
So a few years ago, we had some income tax cuts for the top earners and corporations, and those were stair-stepped. We're in the middle of that. So there is a bill to press pause that would almost completely fill that gap. It sounds like there's some senators that don't want to entertain that, but again, it would be helpful to look at both ways we can bring in revenue and stop money from going out. So that debate will start in late
So
April.
that has been heard, that particular bill, but it's still sitting in committee. Okay, and you don't know where that's going to
Nope.
go. Okay.
Sure don't.
Of course you don't. I mean, okay. Okay, well, cool. So now my question is, how does the league decide what to weigh in on?
That is such a good question. We get that sometimes from the legislators.
I bet.
It's not just like we're sitting down and being like, hey, this is cool. So the way the league is structured, our organization is over 100 years old. And we really are centered in the most local. So you join your local league, and then there's the state and national. We have some overarching guidelines from national that we as states vote on, and that's only after extensive research and consensus and all sorts of things.
And
yes, and usually it's not just one-off. Several states have to get involved, so there's a lot of thought that goes into that. And again, those are kind of the overarching. What I love about the league is then it's the states that get to say, okay, we want a representative democracy. That's one of our main things from the league. We get to say our biggest problem here is redistricting. So we need to look at how we can improve that process.
Right.
So you're
saying another state might have other issues.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So like the natural resources, we have a lot of water and soil issues that other states might not.
Right.
So we as a league choose to speak on those where they might not I'm trying to think of a state that would not.
That's very,
there's
very
soil
urban.
everywhere.
But yeah, true. So
And water.
Yeah, right. You hope.
Yeah.
Right. And air.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's keep all those good things. So those are we have those broad stances that are founded, and our stances haven't changed that much in the 100 years that we've been around.
Right.
So
yeah, it's fascinating to think of all that we have arrived at, positions we have arrived at, and yet it turns out there is a huge, long, big, wide array of topics that we can weigh in on.
Yep.
Yeah, because we've got the background. Yeah. Okay. Well, as the hearing schedule, well, the schedule has concluded now. Hearings have completely concluded, right? They did get through all 800 some?
Yep.
All right.
So that is one requirement of our unicameral is that because we're the second
Everyone-
house,
yes.
every bill has
Gets a hearing.
a public hearing.
Right. None of that stuff of caucuses,
Nope.
their shenanigans.
None of that
Their
shenanigans.
shady business, right? We're
Right.
shady in other
Shady.
ways.
Yeah, we manage in our own version,
Right,
our special
exactly.
Nebraska way. But yes, all
Exactly.
those bills have been heard.
Yeah.
So
So, sorry, but
go
my
ahead.
question is, so when there's a hearing, not only can a representative of the league get up and testify, but anybody can testify.
anybody.
But of course, that's done now. So, well, what else? What can citizens? What can what voters? What can residents of our great state do to have an influence now?
So there are a couple different ways.
Okay.
One is our legislature has been really great in the past few years of moving towards more access for feedback from constituents. And so each bill has a submit comment page. You can still submit on any bill. That doesn't close after the hearing. It's not part of the official record, but the senators still see all of those. So if we haven't had a hearing or a debate on something, and you leave a message, when the senator pulls it up, they're going to see it.
So now, okay, when the hearings were going on, I would learn there was going to be a hearing on a certain bill. I would go onto that bill, and there would be that portal, and so what you're saying is that portal is still there. Okay, so here we go. You can just keep on commenting, and they will get this information. That's great.
It'll be, and it is, some senators are a little more savvy to use it, to look at things.
Okay.
But I've heard it mentioned on the floor that senators will go in and say, okay, who came for this bill? And they're able to see all those comments. If there's something that someone feels really passionately about, I encourage them to email the senator who introduced it and their own senator, just to share their perspective. It doesn't have to be a novel. It can just be a quick, hey, this is how this would affect me, or I disagree with this. And senators do read those. In fact, we have a couple senators who have read some on the floor. Actually, one of our league members had her piece read on the floor by her senator. So they do look at that information. So that's another way that they can directly get involved.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to juggle, especially because of all of the nuances and ins and outs. I really suggest that people find the one or two topics they're really passionate about and get in touch with the organizations that do that. Because most organizations have some sort of action alert, like we do.
Right.
Or, if something for child welfare is really important, First 5 Nebraska or things like that. So usually there's some sort of newsletter that goes out when something moves, so you don't have to pay attention to every single second.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
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 Right. Good. There was something else, but I forgot what it was. Well,
That's okay.
I'll go back to my paper.
Okay. While you do that, I'm gonna pitch
Okay.
one of the things that we do.
Yeah.
Is we do send action alerts, so you can sign up on our website for action alerts. You can also sign up for action teams if that's of interest. But what those are is every Sunday I send out an update that's kind of here's the highlights, and then the bills that we're watching as a league. Anytime those move, we say, hey, now's the time to email your senator and update folks on that.
Strategy. She does strategy. It's great. Can we talk about the sessions on session?
Oh, sure, yeah. So something new that we're doing this year.
Yes, new this year. Great.
And it's working. It's
I
great.
know.
So we realized that our members are all across the state. We have almost 500. So bringing us together is really important. So we decided to have a session on sessions every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. We have a Zoom. And anyone is welcome. We talk about what's happened the past week in the legislature. We talk about what's coming up in the legislature, and then, answer questions and things like that. And that's been really, really awesome to see all the different people involved. It's a great way to share information, but it's also great because we learn so much from other people.
We do.
Because everyone else is plugged in different areas and says, here's my perspective on that. So yet again, another thing you can sign up for on our website.
Yeah, it is amazing. I love hearing. I mean, you are so knowledgeable, and you're greatly appreciated because you do know what has just happened, and Usually you get those bill numbers right.
Usually. And if not, someone puts in the chat which bill number, and we'll help each other.
We end up with the right bill number.
Exactly.
One
or
way
I
or
send
another,
an email
we
after,
do.
like,
Yes.
this is the
But
number.
Yeah, it's true. Members had so much great personal experience to relate to that, and that then if I want to write something, I can include some of that. Yeah. So.
Well, and it's helpful too because, so we've talked about we're a volunteer organization. I like to live stream debate, which you can do on Nebraska Public Media. All of the hearings and debates are streamed. But if I miss something, there might be somebody else who's like, oh, I saw that hearing and here's what you need to know.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's true.
Community is really nice.
Right. Yeah. And folks, if you haven't watched the Unicameral, it's sort of addictive.
It is.
I hesitate to turn it on because I might have things to do, and I'm like.
My favorite is when we get to legislature after dark, because usually they debate between 9 and 5. Towards the end of session, they are asked to reserve their evenings, and you can't be in a room with that many people and not get a little slap happy after dinner.
Right.
So
you're saying that's when it gets interesting.
That's when it gets.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's interesting.
So what?
Many
Last
times.
3 or 4 weeks?
Yep.
Last couple of weeks?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Good. So what is left for the rest of the session?
The biggest thing that's left this session is the budget.
Yeah.
That is. Fun fact, there's only one thing the legislature is required to do, and that's pass a budget. They could pass no other bills, but they do have to pass a budget this year. So that should be coming in the next couple of weeks. The way that process works is the governor submits hey, I think this is how our budget should look in January. The appropriations committee, so the folks who decide where the money is going to go, get together and say, here's what we like and what we don't like about that. And they create their own draft. And then during hearings, they hear from all the agencies that would impact. They all come in and talk to appropriations. After that, appropriations edits and changes things, and then they vote it out of committee onto the floor as a bill. So it actually is a budget bill that then goes through the budget process. So it can be amended and it can be filibustered and all those types of things. So we're waiting for that process. There are a lot of cuts that are included, so I think we'll have a lot of conversations about priorities, and I think it's going to be some hard conversations for them to have, but they have to pass it.
Yeah. Are there any cuts that we, as the league, are especially concerned about?
I'm trying to think in terms of, I mean, for a lot of those action areas, yes. When I think of like some of the cuts that might come down at the county level actually might impact elections. And things like that. But then in those action areas, I mean, there's an effort to cut the money for those who support the deaf community. I heard an appropriations hearing that was heartbreaking because they were wanting to cut money for a program that basically organizes volunteers for when folks start taking care of their parents or elderly relatives. It's like a support group type thing to help keep those people in their homes. And that's one of the programs that potentially could get cut. So it's
some of the greatest ideas are what,
and things like that, where it's like, when we actually look on paper, that saves a lot of money if we're able to help people have the tools to help their family members who also are probably happier in their own homes.
Yes, for sure.
As opposed to the cost and the space that would be used. So I hope that they're thoughtful about the big picture on those.
So shady, weird, and nonsensical.
Occasionally nonsensical. Yeah, occasionally.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, we've got just a little bit of time left, a couple of minutes. And so another question is, how can Nebraskans support or influence policy outside of the state legislative session?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. I think the first thing is figure out what you care the most about, and that's where to start. So that could be volunteering with an advocacy organization.
Such as the League of Women Voters.
But
it could be another one too.
But it could be lots of other things too.
Yeah.
So I think getting in contact with those folks. I think talking to friends and family. I think we forget that, but especially if you're a little more plugged in or starting to be, people don't know what's going on because they have lives.
It took me a long time to discover that, but they really do want to know, and it is, anymore. You and I, well, you were even telling me before the show how you did not know about this one house unicameral legislature for a while after you had moved to Nebraska.
Yeah.
That it took you a while, and it wasn't until you actually joined the League of Women Voters. I was surprised about that. So, yeah, because I'm so old and I've been doing this for so long that I forget that, you know, not everybody is as plugged in.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got their interests, and it's not necessarily state government and how it works. Yeah.
Well, and when you get into the state government piece of it, it's not the huge issues that are everyone's divided on. It's actual things that impact people. So
Right.
I think it's helpful to dig in a little bit to that.
Yeah.
So find what you like, talk to friends and family, join the league. We love to have folks, and we have lots of opportunities, whether it's this type of work or registering voters, but just
We do
staying
a lot of
engaged.
registering of voters, so we do that.
Yes,
yeah.
you do.
Yes, we do.
I don't do that work. You guys do the work
Okay.
on that one.
Right. Okay. Well, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, and we haven't covered it all, I'm afraid.
We didn't hit all 800 bills?
No,
How did we
did
miss that,
not.
Linda?
There was so much we missed, I'm afraid, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Because I bet you'll come back sometime.
I will. And go check out our website if you're interested in the
Yes.
sessions on session or the action teams or
Yes.
alerts.
So what is it? LWVNebraska.org. Yeah, okay. Got that, everybody? So thank you for speaking with us and joining the program, Rachel. For the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm Linda Duckworth, reminding you to inform yourself about issues and candidates and be ready to go vote Omaha. Thank you so much.